My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 27 years old. Have you ever had a family member who treated your time like it belonged to them instead of you? Someone who made plans for your life without bothering to ask, then acted shocked when you finally said no. That's exactly what my sister, Lauren, did to me for years until one Christmas dinner changed everything forever. Picture this: our family gathered around my parents' dining table, the smell of prime rib filling the air, Christmas music playing softly in the background. When my older sister pulled out her expensive leather planner and made an announcement that would shatter our family's peace. What she said next left me stunned, but what I did in response left everyone else speechless. You see, Lauren had been treating me like her personal babysitter since we were kids, always assuming I'd drop everything to watch her 3 children whenever she needed me. But that December evening, when she confidently laid out her plans for my entire week without even asking if I was available, something inside me finally snapped. The next day, when she showed up at my apartment with suitcases and 3 confused kids, expecting me to give in like I always had before, she discovered something that made her face go white and her hands shake. What happened next would cost my family over $100,000, destroy professional reputations, put marriages to the test, and force everyone to learn a lesson they'd never forget. But here's what nobody saw coming. Sometimes the person everyone takes for granted turns out to be the one with the most power to change everything. So, what exactly did I do that caused such chaos? And was standing up for myself worth the explosive aftermath that followed? Let me take you back to where it began. I never thought Christmas dinner would be the day I finally stood up to my sister, but looking back, maybe it was inevitable. My name is Emily Carter, and at 27, I thought I had my life figured out. I run a successful freelance graphic design business from my apartment in Portland, Oregon, pulling in around $85,000 a year, working with startups and small businesses across the Pacific Northwest. Not bad for someone who gets to work in pajamas half the time. But my family, well, they never quite saw it that way. To them, working from home meant I was always available, always flexible, always ready to drop everything when they needed something. And my older sister Lauren was the worst about it. Lauren is 3 years older than me, 30, and everything our parents ever wanted in a daughter. She married David Thompson, a financial advisor with a solid practice, and gave them 3 beautiful grandchildren. Sophia, 8 years old now, smart as a whip and always asking me about my design work. Ethan, 6, with this mischievous grin that gets him out of trouble more often than it should. And little Ava, 3 years old, who still thinks I hung the moon. I loved those kids more than anything, but somewhere along the way, I became the family's default babysitter, not by choice. Mind you, it just happened gradually, the way these things do. When we were kids, I was always the responsible one, the one who cleaned up messes and kept the peace. Mom would say things like, "Emily is so good with children," or "Emily doesn't mind helping out." Dad would nod approvingly and talk about family obligations and doing your part. Lauren, meanwhile, was busy being perfect. Straight A's, captain of the volleyball team, homecoming queen. She went to the University of Oregon, got her business degree, and landed a job as a regional sales manager at Health Tech Innovations, a pharmaceutical company in Portland. Everything came easy to her, including the assumption that other people would handle the inconvenient parts of her life. It started small. When she got married, "Could you watch the kids for a few hours while we go to dinner? Could you pick up Sophia from soccer practice? We have a work thing. Can you babysit?" Never really asking, more like informing me of what was going to happen. And I always said yes because that's what good sisters do, right? But about 18 months ago, something inside me started to shift. Maybe it was turning 26 and realizing I hadn't been on a real vacation in 3 years because every time I planned something, there was a family emergency that required my immediate attention. Maybe it was watching my friend, Maria Gonzalez, set boundaries with her own demanding family and seeing how much happier she became. Or maybe it was the panic attack I had in Target when Lauren called to tell me she was dropping the kids off in 20 minutes because she had a last-minute client dinner. I found myself hyperventilating in the cereal aisle, clutching a box of Cheerios and wondering how my life had become something I didn't recognize. That's when Maria convinced me to see Dr. Lisa Wong, a therapist who specializes in family dynamics and boundary setting. Dr. Wong is this calm, no-nonsense woman in her mid-40s who has a way of cutting through emotional fog and getting to the heart of things. "Your family has trained you to prioritize their needs above your own," she told me during one of our early sessions. "They've conditioned you to believe that saying no makes you selfish when really it just makes you human." We spent months working on what she called boundary exercises, role-playing conversations where I practiced saying no, writing letters I'd never send to express feelings I'd been bottling up for years, learning to recognize manipulation tactics disguised as family love. Setting boundaries isn't about punishing others, Dr. Wang reminded me week after week. It's about teaching people how to treat you with respect. Sometimes that process is uncomfortable, but it's necessary for healthy relationships. By December of 2024, I felt stronger, more centered, more aware of my own worth. I promised myself that the next time someone in my family took my time for granted, I would stand my ground. I had no idea that opportunity would come on Christmas Day. Wrapped up in holiday traditions and served alongside Mom's famous prime rib. Christmas has always been a big production in the Carter family. Mom spends days preparing her signature dishes, that honey-glazed ham she makes every year, scalloped potatoes with 3 different kinds of cheese, green bean casserole with those crispy fried onions Dad loves, and her legendary apple pie with homemade vanilla ice cream that could make grown adults weak. The dining room gets transformed with her best china, the silverware that only comes out for special occasions, and centerpieces she creates herself from pine branches and cranberries she collects from our backyard bush. This year was no different. I arrived at my parents' suburban home in Beaverton at 2 in the afternoon, arms loaded with carefully wrapped presents. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine. Christmas music played softly in the background, and the tree in the corner sparkled with ornaments collected over decades, each one with its own story. Lauren, David, and the kids were already there. Of course, Sophia and Ethan were playing Monopoly with Grandpa Richard, while David helped Mom in the kitchen, probably getting in her way more than helping if I knew my brother-in-law. Ava tottered around in a red velvet dress, her curls bouncing with each step. Sticky fingers from whatever treat Grandma Linda had already given her. Aunt Emily. Sophia spotted me first, abandoning the board game to throw her arms around my waist. Ethan followed, and soon Ava joined the group hug, her little hands leaving mysterious smudges on my sweater. Merry Christmas, Munchkins, I laughed, balancing the presents while returning their hugs. I've got something special for each of you under that tree. Lauren sat in Dad's favorite recliner, scrolling through her phone with that focused intensity she brought to everything. She barely looked up when I entered, just gave me a distracted wave and went back to whatever urgent business matter demanded her attention on Christmas Day. But I noticed something sitting on the side table next to her chair, a leather moleskin planner, the expensive kind that successful business people carry to important meetings. It was open to a page covered in color-coded tabs and neat handwriting. And even from across the room, I could see it was meticulously organized. Something about the way it sat there, so purposeful and deliberate, made my stomach flutter with unease. But I pushed the feeling aside and focused on the warmth of family, the chaos of children, and the familiar comfort of Christmas traditions. Dinner went exactly as it always did, with Dad carving the prime rib with surgical precision while Mom fussed over whether the potatoes were too dry. The conversation flowed in predictable patterns, with Lauren dominating the discussion about her recent promotion and upcoming travel schedule, while David interjected with updates about his growing financial planning practice. I sat quietly, enjoying the food and the chaotic warmth of family despite the underlying dynamics I'd become so aware of through therapy. The children chattered about school, friends, and Christmas morning surprises, their excitement infectious and pure. But as we moved into dessert, I noticed Lauren glancing repeatedly at that leather planner. Her fingers drummed against the table, and she had that look she gets when she's about to make an announcement, the same expression she wore when she told us she was getting married, when she announced each pregnancy, when she delivered news that would affect everyone at the table. My throat tightened as the familiar pattern began to unfold, and I found myself gripping my coffee cup a little too tightly, waiting for whatever was coming next. The moment arrived as Mom was serving her famous apple pie. Lauren cleared her throat and reached for that leather planner with the deliberate movements of someone about to deliver a presentation. She opened it with a flourish, the color-coded tabs catching the light from the chandelier above our dining room table. David and I have some exciting news, she announced, her voice taking on that confident tone she used in boardroom meetings. We've booked a cruise to Hawaii for the 3rd week of January 7th days. 6 nights on Royal Caribbean, premium suite with a balcony. How wonderful! Mom clapped her hands together, her face lighting up with genuine delight. You two deserve a nice vacation after working so hard this year. That sounds fantastic, sweetheart, Dad added, raising his wine glass in approval. Hawaii in January, that'll be quite an adventure. It's going to be amazing, David chimed in. reaching over to squeeze Lauren's hand affectionately. "We've been planning this for months. Spa treatments, fine dining, excursions to volcanoes and beaches, the works." As they continued describing their upcoming luxury vacation, I felt that familiar sinking sensation in my stomach. The way Lauren's eyes kept darting toward me, the careful timing of this announcement during dessert when everyone was relaxed and happy, the fact that she'd brought her planner to Christmas dinner at all, every instinct I'd developed over 27 years of being her sister was screaming that this was leading somewhere I didn't want to go. "The cruise leaves January 15th, Lauren continued, turning her planner so the whole table could see the meticulously highlighted dates. She'd color-coded everything with those expensive gel pens she bought in bulk for work presentations: blue for travel days, green for excursions, yellow for spa appointments, pink for formal dining nights. Then she flipped to another page, this one covered in her neat handwriting and more color coordination. "I've already planned everything out for the kids while we're gone," she said, looking directly at me for the first time since her announcement began. "Emily, you'll watch them this week. I've blocked out your time and created a complete schedule." Not a question, not a request, a statement, delivered with the same confidence she used to announce quarterly sales projections to her team at Health Tech Innovations. She turned the planner toward me, pointing to each carefully planned detail with her manicured finger. "Blue tabs for meals, because the kids like mac and cheese on Tuesdays and pizza on Fridays. Green tabs for activities, because Sophia has soccer practice on Wednesday and Saturday. Ethan has t-ball on Thursday, and Ava needs to be at daycare by 8:30 each morning. Red tabs for bedtimes and bath schedules. Purple tabs for emergency contacts and medical information. I've even written out their favorite snacks and which movies they like to watch before bed," she continued, flipping through pages of detailed planning that must have taken hours to compile. "Sophia's going through a Harry Potter phase, so she wants to watch those. Ethan is obsessed with anything with dinosaurs. And Ava still needs her stuffed elephant to sleep." The children had stopped eating their pie. Sensing the shift in adult conversation, Sophia looked between her mother and me with curious eyes. While Ethan continued methodically eating around the crust like he always did, Ava had climbed into Grandpa Richard's lap and was playing with his tie, oblivious to the tension building at the table. "You'll watch the kids," Lauren repeated, as if saying it again would make it more official. The words hung in the air like a directive from corporate headquarters, not a conversation between sisters. I felt every pair of eyes at the table turn toward me. Mom's hopeful expression, Dad's expectant nod, David's assumption that this was already settled, the children's innocent excitement about spending a week with Aunt Emily. The weight of family expectation pressed down on my shoulders like a familiar burden I'd carried for years. But something was different this time. Dr. Wong's voice echoed in my head from our sessions over the past 18 months. "Your needs matter too, Emily. You have the right to be asked, not told. You have the right to say no." I took a deep breath, feeling my heart rate quicken as I prepared to break a pattern that had been 30 years in the making. "I can't do that, Lauren," I said quietly but clearly. "I have plans that week." The words fell into the room like stones into still water, creating ripples of confusion and disbelief. Lauren's confident expression flickered, replaced by something that looked almost like surprise. "What do you mean you can't?" she asked, her voice carrying that edge it got when subordinates questioned her decisions at work. "You work from home. You can watch them while you work." "I have client meetings scheduled," I replied, amazed at how steady my voice sounded despite the churning in my stomach. "Video calls that can't be rescheduled, and I have a life of my own." "But we already paid for the cruise," David interjected, leaning forward with that earnest expression he wore when explaining investment strategies to his clients. "It's not, Emily, we're talking about $8,500 here. You should have asked me before booking your cruise," I said, each word coming out more firmly than the last. "I'm not automatically available just because you've made plans." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom immediately jumped into peacemaker mode, her hands fluttering nervously as she tried to smooth over the sudden turbulence. "Surely you can rearrange your schedule, dear," she said with that gentle but persistent tone she'd perfected over decades of managing family dynamics. "It's only for 1 week, and they've already made all the arrangements. The children love staying with you. Family comes first, Emily," Dad added with quiet authority, his voice carrying the weight of generational expectations about duty and sacrifice. "Your sister rarely asks for anything, and she works so hard to provide for those children." I felt the familiar pull of guilt, the ingrained need to be the good daughter, the helpful sister. The reliable aunt who never caused problems or rocked boats. But underneath that familiar pressure was something new and stronger, the knowledge that my time had value, that my plans mattered, that being asked was a basic courtesy I deserved. "I'm sorry, but I cannot do it this time," I said, my voice gaining strength with each word. "You need to find another solution." Lauren's face went through a series of expressions, disbelief, then irritation, then something that looked almost like panic as the reality of the situation began to sink in. "We'll talk about this tomorrow," she said finally, her voice tight with barely controlled frustration, "when you've had time to think about it properly. I'm sure you'll see reason." The conversation shifted awkwardly to other topics, but the tension remained thick in the air, like smoke from a doused fire. The children sensed something had changed, becoming quieter and more clingy. Mom bustled around, clearing dessert plates with unnecessary energy, while Dad retreated into the kind of disappointed silence that had always been his preferred method of expressing disapproval. When I left that night, driving home through the quiet streets of Portland, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart was still pounding with a mixture of guilt and something I was slowly recognizing as pride. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to my sister in front of the entire family. But as I pulled into my apartment complex, I knew this was only the beginning. The phone started ringing before I even finished my morning coffee the next day. Lauren's name flashed on the screen, and I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. By the fourth call, I finally answered. "Have you come to your senses yet?" she asked without any greeting, her voice sharp with irritation. "My answer is still no." "Lauren," I replied, surprised by how calm I sounded. "I have commitments that week that I cannot break." "What commitments?" she demanded. "You never do anything important. You sit at home in your pajamas making little graphics for people's websites." The dismissal of my entire career stung. But I refused to take the bait. "My time is valuable to me, even if it isn't to you. I have work, meetings, and personal plans that have been scheduled for weeks." "Reschedule them," she said, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. "This is family, Emily. This is important." "No," I replied simply. "You need to find another babysitter." There was a long pause before she responded. And when she did, her voice had taken on that dangerous edge I remembered from childhood arguments. "Mom can't watch them all week. She has her book club and her volunteer work at the hospital. Dad's got his golf tournament that weekend. This is so selfish of you." "That's not my problem to solve," I said, amazed at how steady my voice remained. "You're their parents. Figure it out. After everything we've done for you," she scoffed. "This is how you repay us." "What exactly have you done for me, Lauren?" I asked, genuinely curious about what she thought she had contributed to my life. The question caught her off guard. She sputtered for a moment before recovering her composure. "We're family," she said finally. "We include you in everything. The kids love you. We invite you to dinners and birthday parties." I almost laughed at the irony. Those family events she mentioned had always been on her terms. At her convenience, the birthday parties where I ended up helping in the kitchen while she socialized, the dinners where I entertained the children while the adults talked, the holidays where my presence was expected but my preferences were never considered. "Yes, family helps each other," I said carefully, when asked respectfully, not when demanded without consideration, "and it goes both ways." "I need to go now," I added before she could respond, and ended the call. Within minutes, my phone lit up with text messages, first from Lauren, then from David, then from Mom. The family communication network had been activated, and everyone had an opinion about my refusal to be the automatic babysitter. David's text was particularly grating. "Come on, Emily, you know how hard Lauren works. Can't you just help out this once? It's not like you have kids of your own to worry about." The implication that my life was somehow less important because I was single and childless hit exactly the nerve they always targeted. But instead of the usual guilt and self-doubt, I felt something else. Anger, clean, justified anger at being treated like my time and commitments were worthless. Mom's messages were gentler but no less manipulative. "I know you love those children, honey. They're so excited about spending time with their Aunt Emily. Please reconsider. Family is the most important thing we have." Then came the extended family reinforcements. My Aunt Patricia sent a long Facebook message about the importance of supporting family members who work so hard to provide for their children. Uncle Robert called and left a voicemail about respect for elders and family obligations. But the worst was when Sophia called me directly that evening, her sweet 8-year-old voice breaking my heart. "Aunt Emily, Mommy said you don't want to spend time with us anymore. Did we do something wrong? I could hear Lauren coaching her in the background, probably thinking that hearing from the children directly would be the final blow to my resolve. But using Sophia to manipulate me just strengthened my determination. "Oh, sweetie, I love you so much," I told her. My voice gentle but firm. "This isn't about you kids at all. This is about grown-up stuff between me and your mom. I will always want to spend time with you, but it needs to be planned properly." "But we already planned it," Sophia said, confusion clear in her voice. "Mommy showed us the schedule and everything." "Sometimes grown-ups make plans without asking other grown-ups first," I explained, keeping my voice steady despite the fury building inside me. "That's not how it should work." After I hung up, I sat in my apartment, feeling the full weight of what I was doing. For 30 years, I had been the family safety net, the reliable one who never said no, never caused problems, never put my own needs first. Breaking that pattern felt like swimming against a current that had been carrying me along my entire life. But Dr. Wang had prepared me for this moment. During our sessions, we had practiced exactly this scenario. She had warned me that families don't give up their patterns easily, that there would be guilt trips and manipulation and attempts to wear down my resolve. "Your family has trained themselves to expect compliance from you," she had said. "When you change the rules, they'll escalate their tactics before they accept the new reality." That evening, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I went online and booked a cabin at Mount Hood for January 15th through the 22nd. The premium Mountain View cabin cost more than I usually spent on vacations, but I paid extra for the non-refundable rate to eliminate any temptation to cancel. Then I sat down at my computer and scheduled client video calls throughout that entire week. I reached out to potential new clients I had been meaning to contact, arranging introductory meetings during the exact period when Lauren expected me to be changing diapers and mediating sibling fights. As I confirmed each appointment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Control over my own life, ownership of my time, the radical notion that my plans mattered as much as anyone else's. The final step was the hardest. I wrote a note to leave on my door, printing it out in large, clear font and slipping it into a plastic sheet protector against the January weather. The note was simple and direct. "Lauren and David, I am unavailable to watch the children during your cruise. As I mentioned at Christmas dinner, I have prior commitments that cannot be changed. Please respect my decision and make alternative arrangements. I hope you enjoy your vacation. Emily." I set the note aside, knowing I would tape it to my front door on January 15th. For the first time in my adult life, I was going to follow through on a boundary I had set, regardless of the consequences. My phone buzzed with another text from Lauren, but I didn't read it. Instead, I turned off my phone and sat in the quiet of my apartment, feeling both terrified and exhilarated by what lay ahead. The pressure campaign intensified over the next few days, but something unexpected happened when I finally learned the full scope of what Lauren was really facing at work. My friend Maria Gonzalez, who works in HR at a company that partners with health tech innovations, called me with information that put everything in perspective. "Emily, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but I heard through the grapevine that your sister is in serious trouble at work," Maria said during our coffee date at our usual spot downtown. "She's supposed to give a major presentation to some pharmaceutical executives the week of her cruise. We're talking about a $500,000 contract." My stomach dropped. $500,000, that was more money than I made in 6 years. "There's more," Maria continued, lowering her voice. "Apparently her boss has been questioning her reliability. She's had 2 family emergencies already this quarter that made her miss important meetings. Word is, if she misses this presentation, she can forget about that regional director promotion she's been gunning for." I sat there, stirring my latte, processing this information. Lauren hadn't mentioned any of this during her Christmas announcement. She'd made it sound like a well-deserved vacation, not a potential career catastrophe in the making. That evening, Lauren called me again, and this time her voice was different, less demanding, more desperate. "Emily, I need to be honest with you," she began, and I could hear the strain in her voice. "This isn't just about a vacation. I have a crucial presentation that week, and if I miss it, my entire career could be in jeopardy." "You should have told me that from the beginning," I replied, "but it doesn't change the fact that you never actually asked me. You just assumed I'd be available." I know, she said quickly. I messed up the way I approached it, but Emily, I'm begging you, please, I'll pay you. I'll cover your expenses for the week. I'll do whatever you want." It was the first time in my adult life that I had heard Lauren beg for anything, and it almost broke my resolve. Almost. I'm sorry, Lauren, but my answer is still no. You had months to plan for this. You could have asked me properly months ago. But instead, you just assumed I'd drop everything for you, like I always have. I can't reschedule those pharmaceutical executives, she said, her voice cracking slightly. They're flying in from Switzerland. This is my one shot. And I can't reschedule my life on 2 weeks' notice, I replied. I've already committed to other things. The truth was, I had scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Wong for the next day because I was starting to waver. The guilt was enormous, especially knowing about Lauren's work situation. But Dr. Wong helped me see through the emotional manipulation. Let me ask you something, Emily, she said as we sat in her comfortable office with its soothing earth tones and strategically placed plants. If Lauren's career was truly this important, why didn't she plan for childcare when she booked the cruise? Why didn't she ask you months ago? I hadn't thought about it that way. People who respect your time ask in advance, Dr. Wong continued. People who take you for granted assume you'll always be available and get angry when you're not. Which category does your sister fall into? The answer was obvious, and it hurt. But what if she really does lose her job? I asked. Then she have learned a valuable lesson about planning and respect, Dr. Wong replied gently. You are not responsible for fixing the consequences of other people's poor choices, even when those people are family. That afternoon, I received a call from David that made me even more determined to stick to my boundaries. Emily, this is about more than just Lauren's job, he said, his voice tight with stress. My financial planning practice is already taking a hit. People at the country club are talking about our family drama. Clients are asking questions about our stability. When a financial advisor can't even manage his own family situation, it makes people nervous about trusting him with their money. So now I was supposed to feel guilty about David's business problems too. The manipulation was getting more sophisticated but also more transparent. I'm sorry you're having business difficulties, David, I said calmly. But that's not my responsibility either. 2 of my biggest clients have already scheduled meetings to discuss possibly moving their accounts, he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. The Peterson family, they've been with me for 8 years, questioning whether I can handle pressure if I can't even get my family to help out in a crisis. Your family problems are affecting your business. Because you created family problems, I replied. I set a reasonable boundary, and instead of respecting it, you've all chosen to create drama. You're destroying our family, he said finally, his voice cold with anger. No, I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. That night, I made my final preparations. I confirmed my Mount Hood reservation, double-checked my client meeting schedule for the cruise week, and wrote detailed notes for myself about maintaining my resolve. I even arranged for my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, to collect my mail and water my plants while I was gone. The next evening, my mom called with one last attempt at persuasion. Honey, I've been thinking about this situation, and I'm wondering if maybe we can find a compromise, she said in that gentle but persistent tone she'd perfected over decades of managing family crises. What kind of compromise, Mom? Well, maybe you could just take the children for part of the week. Your father and I could handle the weekend, and you could take them Monday through Friday. Mom, I said as kindly as I could, that's not a compromise. That's still me providing free childcare because Lauren didn't plan ahead. But the children are so excited about staying with you, she continued. Sophia keeps asking when she gets to sleep over at Aunt Emily's house. And that's exactly why Lauren should have asked me properly instead of just announcing her plans, I replied. Now the kids are disappointed because of her assumptions, not because of my boundaries. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment, looking at the note I'd written for my door, now safely tucked into its plastic protector. In less than 2 weeks, I would tape it to my front door and drive away to Mount Hood, leaving my sister to deal with the consequences of her own poor planning. For the first time in my life, I was going to put my own needs first. And I was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. January 15th arrived with that crisp Oregon winter air that makes everything feel sharp and clear. I had been awake since dawn, my stomach churning with a mixture of nerves and determination as I made my final preparations. My suitcase sat by the front door, packed with comfortable clothes and the books I'd been meaning to read for months. My laptop bag contained everything I needed for the client meetings I'd scheduled throughout the week. At exactly 9 in the morning, I taped the note to my front door. My hands were steadier than I'd expected as I smoothed the plastic protector against the wood, making sure it was clearly visible. The words looked so simple in black ink on white paper, but they represented the biggest stand I'd ever taken in my life. By 9:15, I was loading my car in the parking garage beneath my apartment building. The Mount Hood cabin was a 2-hour drive from Portland, and I wanted to be well on my way before Lauren and David arrived. I had blocked their phone numbers the night before, knowing that if I heard Sophia's voice asking where Aunt Emily was, my resolve might crumble completely. The drive up Highway 26 toward the mountains was beautiful, with patches of snow beginning to appear on the pine trees as I gained elevation. For the first hour, I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Lauren's silver SUV chasing me down the highway. But as the miles passed and the Willamette Valley disappeared behind me, I began to relax into the radical notion that I was doing exactly what I wanted to do with my time. I later learned from Maria, who heard it from her friend who lived in my apartment complex, exactly what happened when Lauren and David arrived at my place. They pulled up at 10:45, 15 minutes early as always, because Lauren prided herself on punctuality. Sophia jumped out of the car first, already reaching for her purple backpack that was stuffed with a week's worth of clothes and her favorite stuffed animals. Ethan followed, clutching his dinosaur collection, while David lifted Ava from her car seat. Sophia reached my door first, her small hand raised to knock when she stopped short. She called to her parents, pointing at the plastic-covered note. Lauren reached the door and read the message once, then again, as if the words might change if she stared at them long enough. According to Maria's friend, who watched the whole thing from her balcony, Lauren's face went through a series of expressions: confusion first, then disbelief, then what looked like genuine panic as the reality of the situation began to sink in. She pulled out her phone and tried calling me, but of course, the calls went straight to voicemail since I'd blocked her number. She tried calling again and again, her voice getting higher and more frantic with each attempt. David took the note from her hands and read it himself, his expression growing darker with each word. The children stood there with their suitcases and backpacks, looking confused and increasingly upset as they sensed the adult panic building around them. "Why isn't Aunt Emily answering the door?" Sophia asked, pressing her face against the glass to try to see inside my apartment. "She's not here, sweetie," David said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Where did she go?" Ethan wanted to know. Still holding his stuffed dinosaur, Lauren was frantically scrolling through her phone, probably trying to find some way to reach me, but I had been thorough in my preparations. I'd even logged out of all my social media accounts to avoid the temptation to check messages. What I didn't know until later was that I had posted an Instagram story from the road, a picture of the beautiful mountain scenery, with the caption, "Self-Care Retreat Week," complete with a location tag from Mount Hood. Lauren saw it within minutes of my posting it, and according to David, she let out a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a scream. "She can't be serious," Lauren kept saying over and over. "She can't actually be doing this to us." But there it was. Proof that I was not only serious but already 2 hours away and completely unreachable. David tried a different approach, calling my parents to see if they could somehow intervene, but Mom and Dad were just as shocked as everyone else. They had genuinely believed that I would come around, that family pressure would work the way it always had before. "You need to call her and tell her to come back," Lauren demanded when she got Mom on the phone. "Honey, I don't think she's going to answer our calls," Mom replied, and I could picture her wringing her hands the way she did when family harmony was disrupted. Meanwhile, I was pulling into the driveway of the most beautiful cabin I'd ever seen, nestled among towering pine trees with a perfect view of Mount Hood. It was exactly the peaceful retreat I needed. The silence was profound after weeks of family drama, broken only by the occasional call of birds in the trees. I carried my bags inside and stood in the main room with its stone fireplace and floor-to-ceiling windows, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete ownership of my time. No one expecting me to be anywhere, no one assuming I would drop everything for their convenience. No one treating my schedule as less important than their own. My phone, still on airplane mode, remained blissfully silent while I was unpacking my clothes and setting up my laptop for the week's work. Lauren and David were facing the full reality of their situation. They had no backup plan, no alternative childcare arranged, and a cruise ship that would leave the next morning whether they were on it or not. According to what I pieced together later, they spent the rest of that day in increasingly desperate phone calls. Professional childcare services that might have taken 3 children for a week required advance booking and references they didn't have. The rates for emergency care were astronomical, assuming they could even find someone available. My parents reluctantly agreed to help, but they had their own commitments that week. Dad had his golf tournament, which he'd been looking forward to for months. Mom had her volunteer shift at the hospital and her book club meeting that she'd already committed to hosting. As the afternoon wore on and reality set in, Lauren and David faced an impossible choice: forfeit their $8,500 cruise and lose Lauren's crucial career opportunity, or somehow piece together a week of childcare that would cost almost as much and leave 3 children feeling shuffled between different caregivers, all because they had assumed that Aunt Emily would always be available, always willing to sacrifice her own plans for their convenience, while they struggled with the consequences of their assumptions. I built my first fire in the cabin's stone fireplace and settled down with a cup of tea and the novel I'd been trying to read for months. For the first time in my adult life, I was exactly where I chose to be. The desperate search for childcare began immediately. But finding someone willing to take 3 children for an entire week on 12 hours notice proved nearly impossible. I learned all of this later from Maria, who kept me updated through a mutual friend since I wasn't answering my phone. The professional childcare services that Lauren called required extensive background checks, references, and advance booking. One agency told her they might have someone available for $200 per day. But even that would require a minimum of 48 hours to arrange interviews and check references. $200 a day for 7 days meant $1,400. Assuming they could even find someone willing to take on 3 children of different ages with no preparation time, my parents stepped in as the only viable option, but they were clearly overwhelmed by the prospect. Linda was 66 years old and hadn't dealt with 3 young children for extended periods in years. Richard had his golf tournament that weekend, something he'd been planning for months with his retired buddies from the engineering firm. "I'll cancel my volunteer shift at the hospital," Linda told Lauren over the phone, her voice already sounding strained. "And I suppose I can move my book club meeting to next month." "What about Dad's golf tournament?" Lauren asked. "We'll figure something out," Linda replied. But I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, even secondhand. Meanwhile, the professional consequences for Lauren were mounting by the hour. She had to call her boss at Health Tech Innovations and explain that she might not be able to attend the pharmaceutical presentation she'd been preparing for months. "Mr. Thompson, I'm having a family emergency with childcare," she said during what must have been one of the most difficult phone calls of her career. "I might need to send Jennifer Adams in my place for the Swiss pharmaceutical presentation." There was a long pause before her boss responded. "Lauren, this is the 3rd family emergency you've had this quarter: the Peterson account, the Morrison project, and now this. Our clients are starting to notice a pattern. I understand your concern, sir, but this is truly unusual circumstances." "Is it though?" Mr. Thompson asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're having trouble managing your personal obligations alongside your professional ones. That's not the kind of reliability we need for a regional director position." The call ended with Lauren's promotion prospects hanging by a thread and her career reputation taking a serious hit. The Swiss pharmaceutical executives were flying in specifically to meet with her, and sending a junior associate in her place would signal to the clients that Health Tech Innovations didn't consider their business important enough for senior management attention. David's situation was deteriorating just as rapidly. Word had already spread through their country club about the family drama, and several of his financial planning clients were asking pointed questions about his ability to manage his own household affairs. "David, if you can't handle a simple childcare situation with your own family, how can we trust you to handle our retirement planning?" asked Mrs. Peterson, one of his oldest and most valuable clients, during what was supposed to be a routine portfolio review. "This is completely different from financial management," David replied, but his confidence was clearly shaken. "Is it, though?" Mrs. Peterson continued. "Both require planning, foresight, and the ability to have backup systems in place when things don't go according to plan." 2 other clients called that same day to schedule meetings about possibly moving their accounts. In the financial services industry, reputation and perceived stability were everything. Clients who were trusting advisors with their life savings needed to believe those advisors had their lives under control. But perhaps the most surprising reaction came from David's mother, Patricia Chen, when Lauren called her in desperation, hoping for another potential babysitter. Patricia's response was not what anyone expected. "Lauren, I need to ask if you could possibly help us with the children this week," Lauren said, her voice carefully controlled. "What happened to Emily?" Patricia asked. "She's being completely unreasonable and selfish," Lauren replied. "She refuses to help family when we really need her." "Did you ask her properly?" Patricia inquired, her voice taking on a sharp edge that surprised everyone. Of course, I asked her when. At Christmas dinner, Lauren said. As if that explained everything. You mean you told her at Christmas dinner? Patricia corrected. You announced your plans and expected her to comply. That's not the same as asking. Lauren. Mom. Lauren sputtered. Clearly not expecting this response from her mother. Tori, I've been watching this family dynamic for years, and I've kept my mouth shut because it wasn't my place. But Emily has every right to refuse to provide free childcare on 2 weeks' notice. You should have arranged this months ago when you booked the cruise. The conversation ended with Patricia declining to help and Lauren hanging up in shock. Even her usually supportive mother-in-law was taking my side. By evening, the full scope of the crisis was becoming clear. Lauren would have to choose between her career-defining presentation and her expensive vacation. There was no magical solution that would allow her to have both without consequences. The children, meanwhile, were confused and upset by the chaos swirling around them. Sophia kept asking why Aunt Emily didn't want to see them, while Ethan clung to his stuffed dinosaur and asked repeatedly when they were going to stay at Aunt Emily's house like Mommy had promised. Little Ava, too young to understand the adult drama but old enough to sense the stress, became clingy and tearful, asking for Aunt Emily and not understanding why everyone seemed so upset, while my family dealt with the consequences of assumption and poor planning. I spent my evening in complete peace. I had built a fire, made myself dinner from the groceries I'd brought, and settled down with my laptop to confirm the client meetings I had scheduled for the week. My phone remained on airplane mode, but even if it hadn't been, I wouldn't have answered. For the first time in my adult life, other people's emergencies were not automatically my emergencies. The next morning would bring even more dramatic consequences as Lauren and David faced their final decision about the cruise. But that night, I fell asleep to the sound of the wind through the pines around Mount Hood, finally understanding what it felt like to put my own needs first. I woke up on January 16th to the most peaceful silence I had experienced in years. No phone calls demanding my immediate attention, no frantic texts about family emergencies, no guilty feelings about disappointing people who had never bothered to ask what I actually wanted to do with my time, just the gentle sound of the wind and morning light filtering through the pine trees outside my cabin window, while I was making coffee and planning a day of hiking and client work. Lauren and David were making the hardest decision of their marriage. They had spent most of the night arguing about what to do, and by morning, they had reached a devastating conclusion. According to Maria, who heard this from Mom later, Lauren called her boss at Health Tech Innovations at 7 in the morning to deliver the news that would effectively end her chances at the regional director promotion. Mr. Thompson, I need to inform you that I won't be able to attend the Swiss pharmaceutical presentation today, she said, her voice carefully controlled, despite what this admission was costing her. I see, her boss replied coldly. And who exactly will be representing our company to these executives who flew in specifically to meet with you? Jennifer Adams is prepared to step in, Lauren said, referring to her junior associate who had been briefed on the project but lacked the experience and authority to close a deal of this magnitude. Lauren, I'm going to be very clear with you, Mr. Thompson said. This is the kind of reliability issue that eliminates someone from consideration for senior management positions. You understand that, don't you? Yes, sir. I understand. The call ended with Lauren's career prospects in ruins and the Swiss pharmaceutical executives being pawned off on a junior associate who wasn't qualified to handle a $500,000 contract negotiation. David's morning wasn't going any better. The Peterson family, his clients for 8 years, called to schedule an urgent meeting about moving their retirement accounts to another advisor. David, we've been thinking about this situation, Mrs. Peterson said during the call. If you can't manage your own family's basic planning, how can we trust you with our financial future? This is completely different, David protested. A personal matter that has nothing to do with my professional capabilities. Planning is planning. Mr. Peterson interjected, his voice firm with decision. We need an advisor who thinks ahead, who has backup systems in place, who doesn't get blindsided by foreseeable problems. The call ended with the Petersons scheduling an appointment to transfer their considerable assets to another firm. 2 other clients called that same morning with similar concerns. And David realized that his reputation in the tight-knit Portland financial services community was being seriously damaged. My parents were discovering their own harsh reality about caring for 3 active children. Linda, who was 66 and hadn't dealt with such chaos in years, was already exhausted by 10 in the morning. Sophia was upset about missing her soccer practice. Ethan was acting out because his routine was disrupted. and Ava was having a complete meltdown because she wanted Aunt Emily. "I don't understand why she won't just come home and help," Linda said to Richard, during a brief moment when all three children were distracted by cartoons. "Because we raised her to think her time doesn't matter." Richard replied with surprising insight, "We've always expected her to drop everything for Lauren. And now she's finally saying no." "But family is supposed to help family," Linda protested. "Help, yes, be taken for granted. No, there's a difference, and maybe it's time we admitted that." Meanwhile, the extended family had divided into camps. Aunt Patricia was posting passive-aggressive messages on Facebook about the importance of family loyalty and sacrifice. Uncle Robert was calling anyone who would listen to complain about young people not respecting their elders or understanding family obligations. But surprisingly, some family members were supporting my decision. David's mother, Patricia Chen, was telling anyone who asked that I had every right to refuse unreasonable demands. My cousin Anna, who lived in Seattle, sent a message through Mom, saying she was proud of me for finally standing up for myself. The most difficult part for Lauren and David was explaining to the children why their planned week at Aunt Emily's house wasn't happening. Sophia, at 8 years old, was old enough to sense that the adults were not telling her the whole truth. "But Mommy, you said we were going to stay with Aunt Emily," Sophia said, her eyes filling with tears. "You said she was excited to spend time with us. Plans change sometimes, sweetheart," Lauren replied, but her voice was strained with the effort of not crying herself. "Did we do something wrong?" Ethan asked, still clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "Is Aunt Emily mad at us?" "No, honey, you didn't do anything wrong," David assured him, but the explanation felt hollow even to him. Ava was the most difficult to comfort because, at 3 years old, she couldn't understand why promises were being broken or why all the adults seemed so upset. She kept asking for Aunt Emily and crying when told that wasn't possible, while my family dealt with the emotional and financial consequences of their assumptions. I spent the day hiking around Mount Hood, breathing clean mountain air and feeling more centered than I had in years. I had my first client video call at noon, a consultation with a startup company in Seattle about their branding needs. The irony wasn't lost on me that while Lauren was missing the most important presentation of her career, I was conducting business as usual from a beautiful mountain setting, completely in control of my schedule and my priorities. That evening, I finally turned my phone back on and was immediately overwhelmed by the flood of messages that had accumulated. Dozens of voicemails, text messages, and missed calls from family members, each one more desperate than the last. But there was one message that surprised me. It was from Patricia Chen, David's mother, and her words were completely unexpected. "Emily, this is Patricia. I just wanted you to know that I think you did the right thing. I've been watching this family take advantage of your kindness for years, and I'm proud of you for finally saying enough. Don't let them guilt you into feeling bad about having boundaries. You're teaching them all an important lesson about respect." That message, from someone who barely knew me but had observed our family dynamics from the outside, validated every difficult feeling I'd been processing over the past months of therapy. As I sat by the fire that night, I realized that while my family was dealing with the consequences of taking me for granted, I was finally learning what it felt like to respect my own time and energy. The real test would come when I returned to Portland and had to face the fallout directly. The week that followed felt like living in the eye of a hurricane, while I remained at Mount Hood, conducting client meetings and enjoying the peace of mountain mornings. My family was experiencing the full consequences of years of dysfunctional patterns finally coming to a head. By Wednesday, the manipulation tactics had escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. Lauren, desperate and facing the reality that her career might never recover from missing the pharmaceutical presentation, began coaching the children to call me directly. She had somehow gotten my number unblocked through a mutual friend and was using Sophia's phone to reach me. "Aunt Emily," Sophia's sweet voice said when I finally answered what I thought was a call from a client. "We miss you so much. Mommy says you don't love us anymore because we asked too much of you." I could hear Lauren coaching her in the background, feeding her lines designed to maximize my guilt. The manipulation was so blatant it was almost insulting. But it still broke my heart to hear Sophia's confusion. "Sweetheart, I love you more than anything in the world," I told her gently. "This isn't about you kids at all. This is about grown-ups learning to ask nicely instead of just expecting things from each other." "But Mommy is crying all the time now," Sophia continued, clearly reciting words that had been prepared for her. "She says the family is broken because you won't help us." "Sophia, I need you to put your mommy on the phone right now," I said firmly. When Lauren took the phone, Her voice was shaky with what sounded like genuine desperation. "Emily, please," she said. "I'm begging you, come home, and we'll figure this out. I'll do whatever you want." "What I want is for you to stop using your children to manipulate me," I replied, my voice harder than I'd ever spoken to my sister. "What I want is for you to learn that other people's time has value. What I want is for you to grow up and handle your own problems. You're destroying our family," she said, her voice breaking. "No, Lauren, I'm setting boundaries. The family drama is your choice, not mine." Meanwhile, the legal consultation that my parents had threatened was moving forward. Linda and Richard had actually contacted a family law attorney, spending $5,000 they could barely afford on a consultation about their rights as grandparents if family dysfunction continued. The attorney, however, gave them news they didn't want to hear. Oregon grandparents' rights were extremely limited, and there was no legal basis for forcing adult family members to provide childcare or maintain relationships. If anything, the documented harassment I was receiving could potentially be used against them if they tried to pursue any legal action. The consultation was a waste of money that only served to highlight how far my parents were willing to go to avoid holding Lauren accountable for her poor planning. David's professional situation was deteriorating rapidly. By Thursday, 3 more clients had scheduled meetings to discuss moving their accounts. Word was spreading through the Portland financial services community that David Thompson couldn't even manage his own family's basic planning needs. The Peterson account alone represented over $2 million in managed assets. Losing that account would cost David approximately $20,000 in annual fees, not counting the referrals and reputation damage that would follow. The country club gossip was particularly vicious. Portland's upper-middle-class social circles thrived on exactly this kind of family drama, and the story of the selfish sister who abandoned her family during a crisis was spreading faster than David could contain it. I heard about it at the club yesterday, one of his colleagues mentioned during what was supposed to be a casual lunch meeting. "People are saying your sister-in-law completely bailed on your family. Makes people wonder about your judgment, you know." But perhaps the most shocking development came when extended family members began organizing what they called an intervention. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert coordinated with several cousins to plan a confrontation designed to pressure me into compliance. They scheduled it for Saturday at my parents' house, assuming I would be back from Mount Hood by then. The plan was to surround me with family members, each taking turns explaining how my selfishness was damaging everyone else's lives. Maria heard about this through her network of mutual connections and called to warn me. "Emily, they're planning an ambush," she said during our Thursday evening phone call. "Your Aunt Patricia has been calling everyone in the family, organizing them to gang up on you this weekend." "Let them," I replied, feeling calmer than I'd expected. "I won't be there anyway." "What do you mean?" "I'm staying at Mount Hood through Sunday. I'm not coming back early to be lectured by people who've spent 27 years enabling Lauren's entitled behavior." The manipulation tactics reached their peak when Lauren claimed to be having medical issues caused by the stress of the situation. She made appointments with her doctor, documenting anxiety and stress-related symptoms that she claimed were directly caused by my refusal to help the family. The medical emergency angle was designed to add another layer of guilt, implying that my boundary setting was literally making my sister sick. But after 18 months of therapy with Dr. Wang, I recognized this as textbook emotional manipulation. When I spoke with Dr. Wang during our emergency phone session on Friday, she helped me process the escalating tactics my family was using. "This is exactly what I warned you about," she said in her calm, reassuring voice. "When people lose their primary source of control over you, they escalate their manipulation tactics before they finally accept the new reality." "But what if Lauren really is having medical problems?" I asked. "Lauren's stress-related symptoms are real, but they're caused by her inability to accept responsibility for her own choices, not by your healthy boundaries," Dr. Wang replied. "You are not responsible for managing other people's emotional reactions to your reasonable limits." The children, caught in the middle of adult dysfunction, were showing signs of the stress too. Sophia was having trouble sleeping, Ethan was acting out at school, and Ava was becoming increasingly clingy and fearful. But instead of recognizing that their own behavior was creating this chaos, Lauren and David blamed me for the children's distress. Every tear, every tantrum, every confused question about where Aunt Emily had gone was laid at my feet as evidence of my cruelty. The irony was that while my family was falling apart from their own poor choices and manipulation tactics, I was thriving. My client meetings that week were some of the most productive I'd ever had. The peace and clarity I felt at Mount Hood translated into better work, clearer thinking, and a confidence I'd never experienced before. But I knew that the real test was coming. Eventually, I would have to return to Portland and face the consequences of standing firm in my boundaries. The question was whether my family would be ready to accept a new reality, or if they would continue to escalate their tactics until they destroyed the relationships they claimed to be protecting. I returned to Portland on Sunday afternoon to find 67 text messages, 43 missed calls, and an inbox full of increasingly frantic voicemails. The emergency family meeting had been scheduled for 2 o'clock at my parents' house, and according to Maria, half the extended family had shown up, expecting to find me there for their planned intervention. Instead, they spent 2 hours sitting around Mom's dining room table, complaining about my absence and debating strategies for bringing me back into line. Aunt Patricia had prepared what she called talking points about family loyalty and sacrifice. Uncle Robert brought printed articles about the importance of helping family members in crisis. Even some cousins I barely spoke to had opinions about my selfishness and lack of family values. But when I didn't show up for their ambush, the whole elaborate plan fell apart. Without me there to pressure and guilt, they were left staring at each other across Mom's good china, realizing that maybe, just maybe, I was serious about these boundaries. The real surprise came when I finally sat down to listen to all those voicemails. Most were exactly what I expected. Lauren sobbing about her ruined career. David explaining how I was destroying his business reputation. Mom pleading for me to come home and fix everything. Dad using his stern voice to lecture me about family obligations and respect for elders. But there were 3 messages that stopped me cold. The first was from Patricia Chen, David's mother, who had somehow gotten my number and called to apologize for her son and daughter-in-law's behavior. Emily, this is Patricia. I've been watching this family dynamic for 10 years now, and I should have spoken up sooner. What Lauren and David did to you was wrong, and I'm ashamed that my son was part of it. You have every right to your boundaries, and I hope you stick to them. The second surprise came from my cousin Anna in Seattle, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Hey, Emily, it's Anna. I heard about what happened through the family grapevine, and I just wanted to say I'm proud of you for finally standing up to Lauren. She's been taking advantage of your kindness since we were kids, and it's about time someone called her on it. Don't let them guilt you into backing down. But the most shocking message came from Richard, my own father, calling on Saturday evening after the failed family intervention. Emily, this is Dad. I've been doing a lot of thinking since yesterday, and I owe you an apology. Your mother and I have always expected you to be the one who gives in, who keeps the peace, who sacrifices for everyone else. We never stopped to consider that your time and your plans matter just as much as Lauren's. I'm starting to understand that we raised you girls with very different expectations, and that wasn't fair to you. His voice was thick with emotion, something I'd rarely heard from my reserved father. I played that message 3 times, hardly believing what I was hearing. Monday morning brought the aftermath. Lauren and David's marriage was showing serious strain as they faced the financial and professional consequences of their poor planning. The missed pharmaceutical presentation had cost Lauren not just the immediate promotion opportunity, but also her standing within the company. Her boss made it clear that her reliability would be questioned for any future advancement opportunities. David's practice was hemorrhaging clients faster than he could replace them. The Peterson family had officially moved their $2 million account to another advisor, taking their referrals and social connections with them. 3 other families were in the process of transferring their assets, representing nearly $4 million in total managed funds. But perhaps most telling was what happened when they finally sat down for their first marriage counseling session with Dr. Michael Harris on Tuesday afternoon. According to what Patricia Chen told me later, the session was a revelation for both of them. Dr. Harris didn't just focus on their communication problems or stress management. He dug into the fundamental assumptions they made about other people's obligations to them. Let me ask you both something, Dr. Harris said after listening to their story. When you booked this cruise, did either of you consider that Emily might have her own plans that week? Well, no, David admitted. Emily works from home, so we figured she'd be available. And when you told her about your plans at Christmas dinner, did you actually ask her? Or did you inform her what she would be doing? Lauren shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I guess I kind of told her, but I assumed she'd want to help. So you assumed she had no important commitments, assumed she'd want to provide free childcare for a week, and assumed she'd be happy to rearrange her life for your convenience. The silence in the room was telling. Dr. Harris continued, his voice gentle but firm. What I'm hearing is a pattern where you both expect others to sacrifice automatically for your needs without considering their perspectives or asking respectfully for help. But family is supposed to help family, Lauren protested, using the same argument we'd all heard for years. Help, yes, be taken for granted. No, there's a significant difference between asking someone for a favor and informing them of what they'll be doing. The session ended with homework assignments that neither of them was prepared for. Dr. Harris asked them to write down every time in the past year they had asked family members for help without considering the inconvenience to those people. He asked them to practice requesting assistance instead of expecting it and to develop the skill of accepting no for an answer without retaliating. Meanwhile, the children were finally getting honest conversations about what had happened. Sophia, at 8 years old, was smart enough to piece together that the adults had not been telling her the truth about why their plans had changed. Mommy, Sophia said during dinner Wednesday night. Did you ask Aunt Emily if she wanted to watch us, or did you just tell her she had to? Lauren looked at David, realizing that even their 8-year-old daughter could see through the manipulation. I told her, Sophia, she said simply. You should have asked. That's what you always tell us to do when we want something. Out of the mouths of babes, David muttered, beginning to understand how their own children were learning unhealthy patterns from watching their parents' behavior. By Thursday, exactly 1 week after I should have been changing diapers and mediating sibling fights, my family was beginning to face some uncomfortable truths about the dynamics they had created and maintained for decades. The question now was whether they would learn from this crisis or continue trying to manipulate their way back to the old, familiar patterns where my time belonged to everyone except me. The gradual shift in my family's understanding didn't happen overnight, but by February, I began to notice small changes that suggested some people were genuinely learning from the crisis they had created. The first sign came from an unexpected source. My father. Dad called me on a Tuesday evening, something he rarely did unless there was a family emergency or logistical matter to discuss. His voice was different, less authoritative and more thoughtful than I was used to hearing. Emily, I've been thinking a lot about what happened last month. And I realize I owe you more than just an apology, he said. Your mother and I raised you girls with completely different expectations, and that wasn't fair to either of you. He paused, and I could hear him taking a breath before continuing. We taught Lauren that her needs came first and other people would accommodate her. We taught you that your job was to be accommodating. That's not how families should work, and I'm sorry it took this crisis for me to see it. The conversation lasted almost an hour, the longest personal discussion my father and I had ever had. He talked about his own upbringing, where the eldest child was given privileges while younger siblings were expected to serve the family's needs. He was beginning to understand how those patterns had shaped the way he and Mom parented us. Mom's single quotes S evolution was slower but equally meaningful. She started by making small changes in how she talked about family obligations. Instead of automatically volunteering my time when Lauren needed help, she began asking if I was available and accepting my answer without argument. When Lauren called in early March, asking if I could watch the kids for a weekend so she and David could attend a marriage retreat, Mom's response surprised everyone. Lauren, honey, you need to call Emily directly and ask her yourself if she's available and wants to help. That's between you two. I'm not going to be the middleman anymore. It was a small change, but it represented a fundamental shift in how our family operated. Mom was no longer facilitating the expectation that my time belonged to everyone except me. Lauren's approach to asking for help began changing though it took several months of marriage counseling for her to understand why her old methods had been problematic. Her first attempt at asking respectfully was awkward but genuine. Emily, this is Lauren. I know things have been difficult between us, and I want to start over. David and I have a work conference in Seattle next month, and we're wondering if you might be available to watch the kids for the weekend. If you're not available or don't want to, that's completely fine. We just thought we'd ask. The difference in tone was remarkable. Instead of demanding or assuming, she was actually requesting. Instead of explaining why I should say yes, she was accepting that I might say no. I was available that weekend and actually wanted to spend time with Sophia, Ethan, and Ava, so I said yes. But the fact that Lauren had asked properly, given me advance notice, and made it clear that no was an acceptable answer made all the difference in how I felt about helping. David's professional recovery was slower but steady. It took him nearly 6 months to rebuild the trust he had lost with his client base, but he eventually won back some of the accounts he had lost. More importantly, he learned to separate his personal life from his professional reputation by being more thoughtful about how he handled both. The children adapted to the new family dynamics more easily than the adults did. Once the chaos settled and they received honest explanations about what had happened, they seemed to appreciate that their relationship with me was based on genuine affection rather than obligation. Sophia, now 9 years old, had become quite insightful about family relationships. "Aunt Emily, I like spending time with you better now," she told me during one of our planned outings to the Portland Zoo. "Before, it felt like you were sad when you watched us, like you didn't really want to be there. Now you seem happy." Her observation was startlingly accurate. The resentment I had carried for years about being taken for granted had affected every interaction, even with the children I loved. Now that I was choosing to spend time with them rather than being coerced into it, our relationship had become genuinely joyful. Ethan and Ava had learned important lessons too. They began asking permission before assuming adult availability, a skill their parents were still developing. When they wanted something, they learned to accept no as an answer without throwing tantrums or trying manipulation tactics. The extended family took longer to accept the new reality. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert continued to grumble about respect for family and proper values, but their opinions carried less weight once my parents stopped supporting their position. Some family members, like my cousin Anna, became stronger allies. She started setting her own boundaries with pushy relatives and credited our conversations for giving her the courage to speak up for herself. Patricia Chen remained a surprising source of support and wisdom. She began hosting monthly coffee dates with me, and during one of our conversations, she shared insights that helped me understand the bigger picture. "Emily, what you did wasn't just about childcare or vacation plans. You forced this entire family to examine how they treat each other. That's not comfortable for people who have been operating on autopilot for decades, but it's necessary for healthy relationships." By late spring, Lauren and David's marriage had stabilized through their consistent work and counseling. Dr. Harris helped them develop communication skills they had never learned, including how to ask for help without expecting automatic compliance and how to accept no for an answer without punishing the person who set boundaries. The most meaningful change came in June when Lauren called to ask if I wanted to go to lunch, just the two of us. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our relationship," she said over salads at a quiet restaurant downtown. "I realize I never really saw you as a separate person with your own life and priorities. I saw you as an extension of my support system. And that was incredibly selfish." She paused, looking directly at me for the first time in months. "I want to rebuild our relationship on better terms, if you're willing. I want to be sisters who respect each other, not just someone who takes advantage of your kindness." It was the most honest conversation Lauren and I had ever had, and it marked the beginning of a genuinely healthier relationship between us. The transformation wasn't complete or perfect, but by summer, my family had established new patterns of interaction based on mutual respect rather than automatic assumption and guilt-driven compliance. For the first time in my life, I felt like an equal participant in family relationships, rather than just the designated helper who existed to solve other people's problems. The professional consequences of that January crisis continued to unfold throughout the summer and fall, creating a complex web of financial and career impacts that took months to fully understand. By September, we could finally calculate the true cost of what had happened when my family assumed my time belonged to them. Lauren's delayed performance review finally took place in August, 8 months after the missed pharmaceutical presentation. While she had managed to recover some credibility through consistently strong work and improved planning skills, the regional director promotion she had been counting on was awarded to a colleague who had demonstrated better crisis management and reliability. The missed promotion meant Lauren lost out on a $40,000 salary increase and significant additional bonuses tied to regional performance, combined with the $15,000 commission she lost from the Swiss pharmaceutical contract that went to a competitor. Her career setback cost approximately $55,000 in immediate and future earnings. David's financial advisory practice took even longer to recover. The Peterson family's departure had triggered a domino effect, with their social connections questioning David's reliability and professionalism. By year's end, he had lost nearly $4 million in managed assets, costing him roughly $32,000 in annual management fees. But perhaps more damaging was the reputation hit within Portland's tight-knit financial services community. It took David over a year to rebuild the trust that had been damaged when word spread that he couldn't manage his own family's basic planning needs. The other costs were equally significant. The $8,500 cruise they forfeited was just the beginning. Emergency childcare for the week cost $1,400. The legal consultation with the family attorney was $5,000. 6 months of marriage counseling at $150 per session added another $3,600 to their expenses. The total financial impact on Lauren and David's family was over $100,000, not counting the stress, damaged relationships, and long-term career consequences that couldn't be measured in dollars alone. But while my family dealt with the aftermath of their poor choices, something unexpected was happening to me. The confidence I had gained from finally standing up for myself translated into other areas of my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. My freelance design business began thriving like never before. The clarity and self-respect I felt after setting boundaries with my family carried over into my professional relationships. I started charging higher rates for my services and requiring more detailed contracts that protected my time and creative process. Clients who used to assume they could call me at all hours with last-minute changes or unrealistic deadlines found themselves dealing with a more professional version of me. I began saying no to projects that didn't align with my values or timeline, and surprisingly, this selectivity made me more desirable to the clients I actually wanted to work with. By fall, my income had increased by nearly 30%. Not because I was working more hours, but because I was working more strategically and valuing my expertise appropriately. Dr. Wong helped me understand the connection between personal boundaries and professional success during one of our sessions. When you respect your own time and energy, other people learn to respect it too, she explained. Clients value what you value. If you treat your services as expendable, they will too. The most surprising development was in my personal life. For years, I had been so focused on meeting everyone else's needs that I had never really developed my own interests or social circle outside of family obligations. With my evenings and weekends no longer automatically available for emergency babysitting or family crisis management, I started exploring activities I had always wanted to try. I joined a hiking group that met every Saturday morning. I took a pottery class at the community center. I even started dating again, something I had given up on because my schedule was always subject to family demands. When I met Ryan, a veterinarian who shared my love of outdoor activities, I was amazed to discover what it felt like to have a relationship that wasn't constantly interrupted by family emergencies. We could make plans and actually keep them because I had learned to protect my personal time. The children adapted to our new family dynamic better than anyone expected. Sophia, Ethan, and Ava seemed to appreciate that their time with me was based on genuine choice rather than obligation or guilt. Sophia, now 9 years old, had become quite the little philosopher about family relationships. Aunt Emily, do you remember when Mommy used to just tell people what to do instead of asking? She said while we were setting the table for dinner. I'm glad she learned to ask nicely. It makes everyone happier. Mom and Dad had perhaps changed the most of anyone. They had spent months examining their own patterns and working to treat their daughters more equally. Dad started asking about my work with genuine interest instead of dismissing it as less important than Lauren's corporate job. Mom stopped automatically volunteering my time and began treating my schedule with the same respect she showed everyone else's. The extended family had mostly adjusted to the new reality, though Aunt Patricia still occasionally made comments about changing values and lack of family loyalty. But her opinions carried little weight now that the immediate family had embraced healthier dynamics. Patricia Chen had become a cherished friend and mentor, joining us for major holidays and offering wisdom about family relationships that helped all of us continue growing. Her perspective as an outsider who had observed our dysfunction with clear eyes proved invaluable in maintaining our progress. As we sat around the dinner table that Christmas, sharing stories and laughter without anyone checking planners or making announcements about other people's obligations, I realized how profoundly my life had changed. My business was thriving beyond anything I had imagined possible. My relationship with Ryan was healthy and supportive, built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. My friendships had deepened as I learned to invest in relationships that were reciprocal rather than one-sided. Most importantly, my family relationships had been transformed from sources of stress and resentment into sources of genuine joy and connection. The woman who had sat at the same table 14 months earlier, feeling trapped and taken for granted, had discovered her own worth and learned to protect it. Setting boundaries hadn't destroyed my family relationships as I had feared. Instead, it had forced everyone to build those relationships on stronger, healthier foundations. Dr. Wong had been right when she told me that setting boundaries was about teaching people how to treat you with respect. The process had been difficult and uncomfortable, but it had ultimately brought out the best in everyone involved. As we moved into the living room for gift exchanges and coffee, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought us to this moment. The courage to say no had taught my family how to hear yes as a genuine choice rather than an automatic obligation. Sophia handed me a card she had made herself, featuring a drawing of our whole family around the Christmas tree. Inside, she had written in her careful 9-year-old handwriting, "Thank you for teaching us all how to ask nicely and how to say no when we need to. You made our family better." Looking around at the faces of people I loved, all of us having learned to treat each other with the respect and consideration we deserved, I knew she was absolutely right. If you've ever felt taken for granted by family members who assumed your time belonged to them, I hope my story gives you encouragement to set your own boundaries. It's never too late to teach people how to treat you with respect. Have you had to stand up to family members who took advantage of your kindness? Share your story in the comments below, and let's support each other in building healthier family relationships. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding your voice and creating the respectful relationships you deserve.